Hey everyone, welcome to Vox Talks. Today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about 3 core tips that I wish I knew before I went ahead and started painting and collecting and really building all of my armies. I have 5 different armies that over the last year and a half I have built and painted really entirely myself, with the exclusion of about 2 units that I had a friend of mine over in Charlotte. She's a great commissioned painter, paint up for me. It was like 6 Centaurians and 1 Mortarion. But beyond that, I have really kind of learned the hard way when it comes to what I should versus shouldn't have done. And I want to make sure that for anybody that's new watching this, or maybe you already have an army and you're kind of getting to that next point where you're trying to decide what faction you want to play next, because whatever it is that you've got right now is maybe feeling a little bit stale. So tip number 1, before you go out and buy a new army, or rather start that collection, reach out to a friend who maybe has that faction or play it on Tabletop Simulator and see if you can't borrow that buddy's army. It's a really great way to kind of get a sense and a feel for how to pilot it, if you like their play style, and also just a general gauge of like, what does this collection actually entail? There are some factions out there that have a lot more codexes, or rather a lot more data sheets than others. And what that means is you could be kind of like getting into a faction, like let's say Custodes, which is a little bit easier to collect, like because of the cost of the data sheets and just kind of the limited number of units they have. Or you could be looking at something like Chaos Space Marines, which is such a deep codex that has such variety in it. And you may kind of realize the hard way when you start collecting and kind of going about the rule of cool, right? We talked about that in the last video. That, hey, this army that I have maybe isn't the most cohesive and doesn't quite make sense. And the reason why I suggest that you reach out and actually try the army out is I don't want you to have happen with what happened to me. Of all 5 armies that I went and I built and I collected, I've had a lot of fun kind of throughout the process, but I will just be completely transparent. I do regret 2 of them. I think Chaos Space Marines, which was something that I just randomly went out and bought maybe 2 months into playing the game. I found like a random bottle box and was like, oh, I'll start playing Chaos Space Marines without having any idea of what I was getting myself into. And then the second one was my Astra Militarum army. Both of these armies I've got, well, for Astra Militarum for sure, I have well over 2,000 points in. And in my Chaos Space Marines, I'm probably sitting around 1,500 or so. And kind of going back to the earlier point, my big regret with them is that these are factions that I didn't really understand how they played or how much cohesion was needed in between these units, and I kind of just went out and built a nonsensical army. And as a result of that, I got something that doesn't really translate very well to how I like to play on the tabletop. Definitely temper your expectations, right? Understand what it is that you want to get out of the army. If it's just a passion project and you think the models are cool, then by all means, go about and doing it. But everything it is that I build and paint, I have an intention of going out and playing it on a competitive level. And the thing with the Astra Militarum army in particular is it is definitely an army with a higher skill gap that has a pretty, I think, stark learning curve. And I don't intend to get rid of that army anytime soon, but I guess when I look back at the hobby time and everything that I invested into it, I wish I had spent that time and money and energy elsewhere. Going into tip number 2, pick one color scheme. Pick a color scheme and stick to it. Now, I don't want to take away from anybody's artistic expression, but you should maybe go into an army, or rather you should definitely go into an army with a very, I think, concrete sense of how it is you want this army to look when you put them on the table. Coming from a Ultramarine player who has well over 7,000 points in those blueberries, I was so burnt out and sick of painting the color blue that if you start to look at my models, and I should have some B-roll footage that'll be rolling here as I'm talking about it, you'll start to notice that my faction colors start to vary all over the board. My designs on my bases, from the actual color schemes, and just the entire general feel and even techniques. And granted, my Ultramarines very much tell the story of, I think, my progression as a painter, but when I put them on the tabletop, I kind of get a little embarrassed, to be honest with you, because I don't think it has the most cohesive feel. Whereas something like my Death Guard army, which I'll also put here, or my Necrons, which I'll also put here, have, I think, a much more cohesive flow to them because I understood the paint scheme I wanted to do. I did some test models and I stuck with it. And I think it's a lesson in discipline too, to kind of challenge yourself to have that cohesive looking army. Because when you put it all on the table, you're going to appreciate it, so will your opponent, and it looks so much better than I think having just a hodgepodge of colorful units. Again, there's no wrong way to do it. This is all fun and there's no rules to it, but it's one of those things that I wish I had told myself and that I knew before I went out and just kind of started randomly doing all of these different color schemes. With all that being said, now we can go ahead and get into tip number 3. Don't chase the meta. And I say that with the caveat that if you're starting a brand new faction, don't go out and necessarily buy that army because it's the thing that's hot at that moment. By the time you get there, it's already going to be gone. You know, the reason why people give the advice of don't chasing the meta is because this game is such a dynamic thing. And we have seen at times that Games Workshop will only let certain combos and maybe broken things that only exist for about 2 weeks. Now, that's not always the case, but emergency data slates do occur and balance updates can kind of just happen on the drop of a hat. Although typically they are set on a little bit more of like an expectation for when they should be happening. But to kind of focus back in on it, the reason why I say don't chase the meta with a brand new army is, had you just built up the army or maybe taken a look at what you already have from your existing pile, it's pretty easy to, I think, pivot when you've already got a collection, you've got a built out army, and then a new unit drops that's relevant for your faction. So you go out, you build it, you paint it, and now it kind of changes the entire way that you play. Whereas if you're starting with a brand new army, A, you probably don't really know how to pilot it quite yet, unless you follow those earlier tips that I talked about. And B, just because of the time investment it's going to take to, let's say you don't even care about painting them, just buying them and building them, more likely than not, something will have changed by the time that you get out there to go out and do it. Now, some people have more time than others, but I do feel like the average time to actually get a full army going for 2,000 points usually ends up taking at least a full month, if not 2. And we both know that within those 2 months, the entire game state can change. So, in recap, make sure that you try to test out the army before you go out and buy one. Use great things like Tabletop Simulator or your local community. Pick a color scheme that you think is going to be not too mind-numbing to paint time and time again. I usually like to try to keep it to 3 kind of base coats, or rather base ideas within the unit that I'm trying to capture. And then the third and final tip, don't chase the meta. Thanks so much for coming by. Have a good day.